In the realm of philosophical discourse, few concepts are as audacious and polarizing as dialetheism. This philosophical stance boldly asserts that there exist statements or propositions that can be simultaneously true and false, thus challenging the foundational principle of non-contradiction. Before we dive in, if you find this content valuable, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. It truly helps us grow. Now, let's get started. Dialetheism, with its roots in Eastern and Western philosophical traditions, sparks intense debates, pushing the boundaries of logic and the nature of truth itself. In this review, we embark on a journey to explore the origins, development, key arguments, and implications of dialetheism, attempting to shed light on this paradoxical perspective. Origins and historical context. The philosophical exploration of contradictions is not a recent development but has deep historical roots. In the Eastern tradition, notably within classical Indian philosophy, the concept of Chatushkoti or the fourfold negation was used to handle contradictions. This approach allowed for the acceptance of multiple, seemingly contradictory statements as valid. In the Western world, dialetheism emerged as a provocative idea in the 20th century, challenging the long-standing dominance of classical logic, which is built upon the law of non-contradiction. The most prominent advocate of dialetheism in the contemporary Western context is the Australian philosopher Graham Priest. His influential work, In Contradiction, 1987, laid the foundation for modern dialetheism by arguing that contradictions can and do exist in various domains of human inquiry. The principle of non-contradiction. To comprehend dialetheism fully, it is imperative to first grasp the principle of non-contradiction. This principle, traced back to Aristotle, asserts that contradictory statements cannot both be true in the same sense and at the same time. In other words, it is impossible for a statement to be both true and false simultaneously. Classical logic, which underpins much of modern mathematics and philosophy, is built upon the principle of non-contradiction. It is the cornerstone of rational discourse and logical reasoning, forming the basis for proof theory and formal systems that have been indispensable in the development of human knowledge. Dialetheism's central claim. Dialetheism, in stark contrast to classical logic, challenges the principle of non-contradiction by asserting that there are statements that can be true and false at the same time. These statements, known as dialetheias, are the crux of dialetheism's paradoxical perspective. The term dialetheia itself combines the Greek words dia, both, and aletheia, truth, signifying the assertion of both truth and falsehood within a single proposition. The core claim of dialetheism can be succinctly stated as follows: some contradictions are true. This proposition challenges the very foundation upon which classical logic rests and opens up a Pandora's box of philosophical conundrums. Dialetheists argue that by rejecting the absolute prohibition against contradictions, we can better accommodate the complexity and nuance of reality. Semantic versus metaphysical dialetheism. Within the realm of dialetheism, a crucial distinction exists between semantic and metaphysical dialetheism. These two subcategories offer different perspectives on the nature of contradictions and the implications they hold. 1. Semantic dialetheism. Semantic dialetheists argue that contradictions can exist within our language and conceptual frameworks without necessarily implying that the world itself is contradictory. They suggest that our linguistic and cognitive limitations might lead us to formulate statements that appear contradictory but can be understood in a way that respects the principle of non-contradiction. 2. Metaphysical dialetheism. In contrast, metaphysical dialetheists claim that contradictions are not merely linguistic or conceptual quirks but are inherent features of reality itself. They argue that some aspects of the world are genuinely contradictory, challenging the very structure of classical logic and traditional metaphysical systems. The distinction between these two perspectives is critical, as it influences the scope and implications of dialetheism. Semantic dialetheism allows for contradictions to exist within our linguistic practices while preserving the non-contradictory nature of reality, whereas metaphysical dialetheism asserts that contradictions are a fundamental aspect of the world. Paraconsistent logics. To navigate the terrain of dialetheism, one must grapple with par-consistent logics. Par-consistent logics are formal systems of logic that tolerate contradictions to varying degrees. They provide a mathematical and logical framework for dialetheists to work within while respecting the principle of non-contradiction to some extent. One well-known par-consistent logic is known as LP, or logic of paradox, which was developed by Graham Priest. LP allows for the existence of true contradictions, but imposes constraints to prevent the entire logical system from collapsing into inconsistency. This delicate balance between accepting some contradictions while maintaining logical coherence characterizes par-consistent logics and their relevance to dialetheism. The liar paradox and dialetheism. One of the most famous paradoxes that has intrigued dialetheists is the liar paradox. This paradox arises from a self-referential statement, such as this statement is false. If the statement is true, then it must be false, as it claims. Conversely, if it is false, then it must be true, as it denies. This creates a self-referential loop that defies classical logic's law of non-contradiction. Dialetheists find the liar paradox to be fertile ground for their arguments. They contend that the liar paradox demonstrates that there are propositions that are both true and false, thus challenging the absoluteness of the principle of non-contradiction. The liar paradox serves as a compelling case study in the realm of dialetheism, highlighting the tension between classical logic and paradoxical statements. The advantages of dialetheism. Proponents of dialetheism argue that it offers several advantages and insights in various domains of philosophy and beyond. These advantages are instrumental in understanding the appeal of this seemingly paradoxical perspective. 1. Resolution of paradoxes. Dialetheism provides a potential resolution to paradoxes like the liar paradox and the Sorites paradox, which classical logic struggles to address satisfactorily. By accepting some contradictions as true, dialetheism offers a way out of these logical conundrums. 2. Accommodating complexity. Dialetheism acknowledges the complexity and subtlety of reality. In domains like quantum mechanics and metaphysics, where phenomena often defy classical intuitions, dialetheism can offer a framework that better captures the intricacies of the subject matter. 3. Philosophical exploration. Dialetheism encourages philosophers to explore the limits of logic and our understanding of truth. It pushes the boundaries of what is philosophically conceivable, fostering creative and unconventional thinking. 4. Cross-cultural insights. Dialetheism connects with Eastern philosophical traditions, such as Buddhism and Madhyamaka, which have long grappled with the acceptance of contradictions. This cross-cultural dialogue enriches philosophical discourse. Challenges and criticisms. Dialetheism is far from being universally embraced in the philosophical community, and it faces several challenges and criticisms. 1. Semantic concerns. Critics argue that dialetheism may be a result of linguistic or conceptual confusion rather than a genuine insight into reality. They contend that seemingly contradictory statements might be resolved through more precise language or a deeper analysis of concepts. 2. Scope of application. Dialetheism's application outside of specific paradoxes is contentious. Critics question whether dialetheism is a broadly applicable philosophical stance or if it's limited to certain exceptional cases. They argue that the acceptance of contradictions should be warranted on a case-by-case basis rather than as a general principle. 3. Logical complexity. Some critics argue that dialetheism introduces significant complexity into logic and philosophy without providing sufficient clarity or explanatory power. The introduction of true contradictions can make reasoning more intricate and less intuitive. 4. Metaphysical implications. Metaphysical dialetheism, in particular, faces challenges regarding its implications for our understanding of reality. Critics question whether a worldview that includes inherent contradictions is coherent or meaningful, as it appears to undermine the very foundations of rational inquiry. 5. Conservatism and logic. Many philosophers are hesitant to abandon the principle of non-contradiction, which has been a foundational principle of logic and philosophy for centuries. They argue that classical logic has been remarkably successful and that dialetheism should bear the burden of proof when advocating for a significant departure from this tradition. Dialetheism stands as a provocative and challenging perspective within the realm of philosophy, pushing the boundaries of traditional logic and our understanding of truth. It offers a bold solution to paradoxes and challenges the principle of non-contradiction by asserting that some statements can be simultaneously true and false. While dialetheism has its proponents who see it as a valuable tool for addressing complex problems, it also faces substantial criticism and skepticism. The debate over dialetheism forces us to reconsider the nature of logic, truth, and the limits of our understanding. It encourages philosophical exploration and cross-cultural dialogue while raising profound questions about the structure of reality itself. Whether dialetheism ultimately represents a philosophical breakthrough or a conceptual cul-de-sac remains a subject of ongoing discussion and inquiry within the philosophical community.